We researched the target audience for the horror genre. We found out that the target audience is males aged 16 to 35, but we also discovered that adrenaline junkies also like the horror genre. We also found out that the certificates on the films also identify who the target audience is. For example, Halloween has an age certificate of 18, therefore this shows that only a person aged 18 or above may watch the film. We also saw that marketeers aim to release a horror film around the time of Halloween because this is more appropriate. Institutions such as 20th Century Fox tend to distribute horror films rather than produce them because horror films are not their most successful. Unlike Warner Bros., who have been more successful than the 20th Century Fox with horror films, they have produced films such as Orphan, House of Wax and Friday the 13th. Lionsgate Institution have also produced horror films in the last 5 years. They have produced films such as Saw, The Last Exorcism and The Eye. The horror genre is marketed all over the world, but through my research I have found out that the horror genre is not the most popular of films.
In horror, there are many different types of categories of cinematic horror or subgenre. For example, Gothic are films based on classic tales of horror, often adapting pre-existing horror monsters or terrifying creatures from various mythology, i.e. Dracula, Frankenstein and the Mummy. Films that involve interventions, spirits, ghosts and witchcraft and the devil, often featuring uncanny elements of film, such as The Exorcist, The Blair Witch Project. These are all called supernatural or ghost films. Another type of genre is psychological horror. These films explore the psychological state, i.e. serial killers, psychos and criminality. These films include The Hand That Rocked the Candle, Silence of the Lambs and Cat People. Monster movies are one of the largest subgenres within horror. These films feature invasions of the everyday natural world, such as Godzilla, The Host and Cloverfield. Slashers, a big part of the horror genre in general. This portrays groups of teenagers menaced by a stalker, usually set in a domestic surveillance space. For example, the only survivor is usually a vulnerable female, such as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I Know What You Did Last Summer and The Nightmare on Elm Street.
There are 6 main conventions to what makes a film in the horror genre. The first is darkness. This could be darkness in a place, such as shadows. The second is isolation. This could be an isolated person or an isolated house in the middle of a forest. The third is the female victim. This female is often known as the final girl. The fourth is the disruption of normality. For example, in the film Human Centipede, this is a doctor. He is also known as the human monster. The fifth is the subplot between a relationship between a male and a female. Last is the defeat of a monster. Not all horror films end in a happy ending, but sometimes the person that makes the film a horror is killed off. A hybrid is a film that has combined conventions from other horrors into one film to make a different genre. For example, a rom-com. This is a film that includes conventions from the romantic films and comical films. An example of a horror film that includes comedy is Shaun of the Dead.
Visual things that make up iconography include
costume, setting, characters,
plot.
light and sound.
Masks and costumes are used in films like Scream. The dark costume connotes death and became iconic because of the haunting mask used to thrill audiences. Horror films use iconic settings like hospitals, forests and other distinctive places, normally isolated. Paranormal activity is set in a house, which removes the audience's sense of security as they believe that it could happen in their home. In many horror films, lighting is normally low, creating suspense. In Silence of the Lambs, darkness is used, creating fear and making the audience uncomfortable.